Hope everyone is alright. This video is going to be relatively swift. What you guys see behind me is a debate being led by Jeremy Corbyn. Jeremy Corbyn, based on Extinction Rebellion. Extinction Rebellion has been this group that is rebelling against extinction, or the drive towards extinction that humanity seems to be careening towards. Their generation, the younger generation, is kind of looking at this saying, you're trying to kill us. It's kind of like going on a bender early in the morning and screwing your later self over. It's like, God, that earlier me keeps screwing me over. But in this particular case, we're talking about extinction of the human species, or at the very least, a very difficult, rough time for the species that is the people who are going to be there living through that particular environmental system. It will be much worse and a much more hostile environment towards human life. The group is pushing very hard, particularly in the UK. Now, the beauty of them pushing very hard in the UK is that they have an attentive socialist who's listening to them, that is the leader of the opposition, that heard them, that saw the protests, and that was receptive to those protests. Not to mention, not just receptive to the protests. If the scientists, the people who measure, who understand your world, who build your boats, your bombs, your planes, who build your telecommunication systems, who build your sewage management systems, your nuclear power system, your power lines, that builds your house, that builds the satellites that are in space, that is doing all of these, looks like magical things, using science, logic, investigation. If those guys who are doing that stuff, who are measuring your world, and we're not talking about religious stuff, we're not talking about, God, or what is the purpose of life, or why does reality exist in the first place? Are there other sorts of realities? Can we get into those realities? This is not those questions. This is a measurement that is taking place from the standpoint of scientists observing and measuring our planet and coming to a conclusion based on evidence. And they're saying you have 12 years left. And these are guys who've been conservative in their estimates. And if we're being honest, even that number is probably a conservative estimate. Because let's be honest, saying that you have 12 years, the world doesn't necessarily have to abide by your model. It doesn't necessarily have to take a measured linear approach in which it goes off of a cliff. There could be other drivers and things, meaning there could be things that spur on so things, for example, methane. You have a certain situation, there's a technical term for it that I can't think of the technical term for it, but the ice melts. The ice was reflecting sunlight, which was one of the things that kept the heat down on the planet. And the more and more of the ice that go, the more sunlight, heat, gets stuck into the oceans themselves, rising the heat of the planet. Methane comes out of it. Do you consider methane in your models when you're making those models about the linear projections? Some may, but these things are to some degree somewhat unpredictable, and how intense and how fast this can go bad. I would just put to you this 12 years is a conservative estimate, and it's a conservative estimate in a way that they cannot possibly exactly know. It's a prediction. Why do you want to risk humanity on a prediction? Even if I'm wrong, I get a better planet. Like that's what's at stake. So these guys have been pushing hard against the climate thing. They've been trying to get the political system to pay attention to what they've been saying. And finally, somebody listen. Even if it's symbolic, somebody listen. The cynical part of me saying it's symbolic. What you're seeing behind me is the British Parliament debating Labour's motion to call climate change an environment, let's say environment and climate, an emergency, a national emergency. Parliament debated this. Now, this is interesting because it's Labour. Labour is not in power in the government itself, meaning the Conservative government had to allow Labour to have this, meaning to bring this up for contention and bring this up for a vote. This passes. Take a look at this. This is the first government in the world that has passed a motion calling climate an emergency or national.
Should the question be now put? Most other people say aye. No, I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. The question is as on the order paper. As many as are of that opinion, yeah, we'll come to that. As many as are of that opinion say aye. Aye. On the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Point of order, Sue Hayman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm absolutely really proud to be part of a parliament that has passed a climate and environment emergency. However, I'd like to draw attention to the fact the motion passed a certain set of actions for the government to carry out. To increase the ambition of the UK's climate change targets under the Climate Change Act, to achieve net zero emissions before 2050, to increase support for and set ambitious short-term targets for the rollout of renewable and low-carbon energy and transport, and to move swiftly to capture economic opportunities and green jobs in the low-carbon economy while managing the risks for workers and communities currently reliant on carbon-intensive sectors, and further calls on the government to lay before the House within the next 6 months urgent proposals to restore the UK's natural environment and deliver a circular zero-waste economy.
Now, like I said before, this aspect of me comes back and says this is symbolic. It's a symbolic gesture. By the same token, you do have to start somewhere. Also, this other aspect of me rears its head when I say you have to start somewhere and says there are local elections that are taking place in the UK. And the UK's political scene is not exactly like the United States political scene in the sense that climate change is not necessarily a political topic there, at least I don't think it is, not that I've come across. It's somewhat of a settled thing, meaning they believe, for the most part, in science. So the Tory party allowing this, there's no negative in a political sense. In fact, the negative might have been Theresa May pushing back against us, not allowing us to go through. It's entirely symbolic. Well, there's certain measures that the government needs to put forward, but it gets a little dicey on entirely what that means. But it's starting somewhere. It also gives you this notion that if there's a Prime Minister, Jeremy Corbyn, that he's going to take this far more seriously than the Prime Minister is taking something like this. In that debate, they were taking the Tories to task for cutting funding for various items. I'm going to do a specific video on that, so I'm not going to get into that on this one. But it's a start. Yes, I wish there was teeth to these type of measures. I thought they were being serious about these measures. But again, it's a start. It's a wink from the political system. At the very least, the political system is listening to the public on this issue, at least in the UK. Get Corbyn. Get Corbyn. If you have anybody that believes in this stuff and would take this seriously, it would be Corbyn. The Tories are terrified that this is election that's coming up. There's going to be local elections that are going all through the UK, and it's going to be one of the largest ones that they've had in several years. They could get potentially decimated at the polls at the ballot box based on Brexit. Theresa May is not going to say or do anything that is going to disadvantage her party. Meaning, if Jeremy Corbyn wants to bring up a climate change thing, I'm not going to fight you on this particular issue. I'm going to let it go pat, and yes, I'm going to let it go through. I don't need to die on this hill. So, clap of the hands to the UK Parliament, at least on this issue. I'll leave it here. I'll talk to you guys in a few. I want to get some games in, but I definitely wanted to give Britain, I guess, a nod on this one. It's the first government that has declared an emergency. The question becomes, what do you do about the fact now that you've declared it an emergency? And if your government declares something an emergency but doesn't do anything about it, that looks utterly schizophrenic. What do you do now that you've declared it an emergency? And are they going to follow through? Those are the two things to look out for. All right, guys. Talk to you in a few.